If you were to stand today in the shadow of the Castel Sant'Angelo, expecting the hushed reverence of the eternal city, you would not hear a Gregorian chant. You would hear the rhythmic, bone-shaking percussion of a pneumatic drill. The air is not thick with frankincense, but with the chalky taste of pulverized travertine and diesel exhaust. Rome, the sanctuary of saints and martyrs, has become an open-air construction site, a labyrinth of orange safety netting and detour signs that channel the faithful like water through a sluice. This is the prelude to the Jubilee of 2025, a massive €2 billion gamble designed to polish the Vatican's doorstep for the arrival of 35 million souls. The undertaking is staggering in its ambition. At Piazza Pia, the very earth is being scooped out to create a new underpass, burying the traffic that once choked the approach to St. Peter's so that pilgrims might walk a pedestrianized path to salvation. The city's ancient veins are being opened to install 5G networks, promising that the spiritual epiphany of walking through the holy door can be instantly uploaded to the cloud. But as the jackhammers tear into the cobblestones, they expose a tension that has vibrated beneath the city's surface for centuries. This is the collision of the celestial and the commercial, the friction between the city as a spiritual vessel and the city as a machine of mass tourism. For the residents of Rome, this preparation feels less like a holy anticipation and more like a siege. The promise of millions of visitors has triggered a gold rush that is hollowing out the historic center. Long-term tenants are receiving eviction notices as landlords pivot to the lucrative short-term rental market, transforming residential blocks into dormitories for the transient devout. The small, dimly lit trattorias and artisan workshops are vanishing, replaced by fast food kiosks ready to feed the multitude. There is a bitter irony in displacing the living community of Rome to accommodate the temporary Pilgrim of Hope. It forces us to ask what remains of a holy city when its citizens are pushed to the periphery, leaving behind a stage set for a year-long liturgical performance. This logistical frenzy raises a profound theological question that often gets lost in the noise of urban planning. Can a genuine spiritual journey exist inside a construction zone? The traditional idea of pilgrimage is one of arduous travel, reflection, and a stripping away of worldly concerns. Yet the modern pilgrim arriving in 2025 will navigate a city optimized for efficiency, crowd control, and digital connectivity. We are witnessing the industrialization of grace, where the infrastructure is as critical as the liturgy. The danger is that the pilgrim becomes indistinguishable from the tourist, a consumer of an experience rather than a seeker of transformation. As the scaffolds rise around Bernini's masterpieces, wrapping angels in green mesh, we must consider whether we are preserving the sacred or merely packaging it. To understand the machinery of the modern Jubilee, we must look backward, past the excavators and fiber optic cables, to the moment this grand tradition was invented. The year was 1300, and Europe was gripped by a spontaneous, feverish desire for redemption. Thousands of people began to flow toward Rome, driven by rumors that a visit to the tombs of the apostles would grant a full pardon for their sins. Pope Boniface VIII, a pontiff known for his astute political mind and assertive power, saw this unorganized wave of humanity not just as a spiritual phenomenon, but as an immense opportunity. He issued the bull Antiquorum habet fide relatio, formally proclaiming the first holy year. However, the Jubilee of Boniface VIII was a significant departure from its ancient namesake. The word Jubilee comes from the biblical Yovel found in the book of Leviticus. In the ancient Hebrew tradition, the Jubilee occurred every 50 years and was a radical socioeconomic reset. Slaves were freed, debts were forgiven, and land was returned to its original owners. It was a mechanism to prevent permanent inequality and destitution. Boniface transformed this concept of earthly liberation into a system of spiritual transaction. The debt to be forgiven was no longer monetary, owed to a neighbor, but metaphysical, owed to God. The liberation was not from servitude, but from the temporal punishment of purgatory. The success of the 1300 Jubilee was absolute and overwhelming.
The poet Dante Alighieri was in Rome that year and described the crowds crossing the bridge near Castel San Angelo as so dense that a traffic control system had to be devised, one of the first in history. But alongside the piety, there was the undeniable sound of currency. Chroniclers of the time left us a searing image that perfectly encapsulates the dual nature of the event. They reported seeing priests standing at the altars of St. Peter's and St. Paul's, not with collection plates, but with rakes. They used these garden tools to drag the piles of gold and silver coins offered by pilgrims into the safety of the treasury. This image of the rake is uncomfortable, yet it is essential to the DNA of the Jubilee. It established a precedent that the spiritual renewal of the faithful and the financial liquidity of the church were inextricably linked. The influx of wealth in 1300 helped to solidify the papacy's power and funded the artistic and architectural grandeur that defines the Vatican today. It revealed that a pilgrimage, while a journey of the soul, is also a potent economic engine. The rakes of the Middle Ages may have been replaced by digital ticketing and city taxes, but the underlying structure remains. The Holy Year is a moment where the spiritual hunger of the masses meets the material needs of the institution, a convergence that has always required careful and sometimes cynical management.
Returning to the precipice of 2025, we find the dynamics of 1300 alive and well, though the mechanisms have evolved. The plenary indulgence remains the theological centerpiece of the Jubilee, a total cleansing of the temporal punishment due to sin. But today, accessing this grace involves a synthesis of medieval doctrine and Silicon Valley user experience. The Vatican has introduced the Pilgrim Card, a digital pass that allows the faithful to register for events, track their journey, and access the Holy Door. It is a system of efficiency that would have baffled Boniface, yet it serves the same function, organizing the chaos of salvation into a manageable stream. This digitization brings us to the modern paradox of the Jubilee. The theme for 2025 is Pilgrims of Hope, a message desperately needed in a fractured world. Yet, critics argue that the event risks becoming a Disneyfication of the faith, where the profound mystery of repentance is reduced to a checklist of tourist activities. Visit the basilica, snap a photo, scan the QR code, receive the indulgence. When the spiritual act is smoothed over by apps and fast lanes, does it lose the friction necessary for genuine transformation? If the struggle of the journey is removed, replaced by high-speed trains and pre-booked slots, is the pilgrimage merely a commute? However, to dismiss the Jubilee solely as a commercial enterprise or a tourist trap is to overlook the resilience of the human spirit. For centuries, pilgrims have walked to Rome through plagues, wars, and corruption. They arrived in 1300 seeing the rakes gathering coins, and yet they still fell to their knees in prayer. They understood, perhaps better than we do, that the institution is the vessel, flawed and worldly, but the water it carries can still slake thirst. The resident complaining about the construction noise and the pilgrim weeping at the tomb of St. Peter are characters in the same enduring drama. As Rome rushes to pave over its cobblestones and polish its marble, the true test of the 2025 Jubilee will not be in the efficiency of its transport systems or the revenue generated for the city's coffers. It will be in the quiet, unscripted moments that happen despite the infrastructure. It will be found in the pilgrim who manages to tune out the jackhammers to find a moment of silence in a crowded nave. The gamble of €2 billion buys better roads and cleaner facades, but it cannot buy the sacred. That arrives only when the individual, standing amidst the dust and the scaffolding, chooses to look past the construction of men and seek something eternal. The city may be a trap of commerce and stone, but for the sincere heart, it remains a threshold to the divine.